This is the Mike Farwell Show on 570 News.
Raywat Deonandan is an epidemiologist and associate professor at the University of Ottawa and joins us to talk about it. Raywat, good morning.
Good morning.
What should a reopening plan look like from your perspective when we consider here the province of Ontario, which has been so hard hit?
It has to consider the right metrics. I think we have to shy away from this temptation to put calendar dates on our plans. It should be driven by what we observe in the pandemic. Obviously, there are some epidemiological indicators we always talk about, things like the magical reproduction number, the incidence rate, the test positivity rate, those wonderful things. But I think we're at the stage now where we have to consider primarily the space in the hospitals, because those other factors are going to start trending in the right direction if they haven't already done so. But a colleague of mine, David Fissman, was on another radio show talking about his conversations with the film industry and their concerns about filming in Toronto. And their biggest concern was, do their stuntmen have space in the hospital in case they get injured? All right, so that's the kind of thing we have to start thinking about now, and hospital space is a lagging indicator. So when that drips below a certain number, I think then we can start really exploring reopenings with some vigor. So
might it be a wee bit premature, again, focusing here in Ontario, Raywat, but to put some milestones out like Quebec, like Saskatchewan have done?
I think so, some of them. Now, the Quebec reopening plan is very good in some ways. I think the outdoor activities, absolutely, we should be doing those. The third wave is not driven by outdoor activities or by patio dining, for that matter. The theater reopenings, the sports events, especially ones that are indoors, I'm a little more skittish about. But again, it comes down to the observables. How many people are getting shots in their arms? How distributed those people are? Like, are they just in the hot zone areas? Are they outside the hot zone areas? What's the incidence rate look like? And what's their expectation for more vaccines to arrive? So there's some moving targets at play. I will say, though, that I'm very optimistic. Things are looking pretty good from where I sit. And I think the summer will be better than we think it is.
There has been some talk already that Ontario's plan will, when we start to hear more about it or learn more about it, will do away with the color coding that we tried to get used to but was confusing for so many earlier on in this pandemic. Is that a step forward, in your opinion, Raywat, to kind of make more clear the messages around this?
I think so. The color coding was a bit of a disaster, and I don't want to blame anyone for that. They tried to give clarity, as everyone asked for, and it just got a little more muddled. So I think what people want to see is, what can I do, right? And what can I do now to get to the point where I can do more things? So if we give them some clear goals, like if we drive this number down, if we create space in the hospitals, then everyone wins. But the color coding system was, it's not NORAD. We're not going DEFCON 2 or 3, and even no one understands that even. So what we need to do is simply say, what can I do now? This entire pandemic has been an exercise in figuring out clarity of communication, and I don't think anyone's done a very good job at it, so I'm sympathetic, but we can always do better, and doing away with that system, I think, is a good move.
You talked about some of the key indicators that we should be looking for before we consider moving into phases of reopening. So the reproductive rate you touched on, and Dr. David Williams has said, we need to get below 1,000 cases per day consistently. You talked about the space available in our hospitals. Is there a magic number in your mind, Raywat?
Maybe. I'm reticent to say what those numbers are because I haven't done any modeling. I haven't seen the new modeling. These will be driven by modeling exercises. In general, below 1,000 cases per day is good, but that takes us to really close to the height of the crisis last fall. It has to be well below 1,000, maybe even below 100. Possibly. And we'll get there pretty soon, frankly. The vaccination rates have to be high, upwards of 70%, if not higher. The eagerness for vaccination must be there as well. And it is, frankly. The reproduction number has to be below 1 for several days in a row. And the hospital space must be there, again, for several days in a row. The test positivity rate has to be below 3%. That's the threshold used in some other jurisdictions. With the caveat that we have to be doing lots of testing to make sure that test positivity rate actually means something. So even though I said I wasn't going to give you some numbers, I gave you some numbers. I'm going to regret that. But they're low numbers.
I promise I won't be too hard on you as we watch those numbers and get excited for reopening. You also said, Raywat, that you're feeling optimistic based on where we are from where you're sitting. What is it that gives you that optimism right now?
Globally, cases are coming down. It looks like the peak of this third or fourth or second wave, depending upon where you are in the world, is past us. Not everywhere. There are parts of India, for example, that are still in crisis. And even though the peak is behind us, the world is still in crisis. And it looks like the modeling is showing we'll get through the bulk of this last wave in Canada by the end of June, definitely by the end of the summer, unless something really outstanding happens, like we reject all the vaccines or the vaccines turn out not to work or a new variant arises that is quite hyper-transmissible, or we reopen too quickly. All these things are possible, but it seems unlikely. So I'm optimistic on that front. And we're getting a lot of vaccines. Like, they're arriving in torrents now, and the eagerness for our population to accept vaccines is quite high. I mean, some survey data suggests that 90% of Canadians want a jab. That is great, because we'll need those 90% to reach something resembling herd immunity. So it looks like the demand is there and the supply is there for vaccines. And those two things in place, I don't see why we can't get this done quickly.
Raywat, really appreciate your time on the show today. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
The Mike Farwell Show, weekdays from 9 to noon on 570 News.